What if I told you that what you're living right now, isn't life at all, but something else entirely, that everything you call real, the people, the places, the memories you swear by, all of it is happening after the thing you fear the most, death? Let that sink in. Because if even a part of you feels that subtle internal pull, the one that's always whispered, something isn't quite right here, then you're already closer to remembering the truth than you realize. You've been taught that life starts with your first breath and ends with your last. A straight line, a timeline, a story that begins at birth and wraps itself up when the heart stops beating. That's the narrative you've inherited. It's the myth you've swallowed without question. But what if that timeline is a lie? What if birth is not the beginning, but the continuation of something else? What if death didn't come after life, but before it, and what you're experiencing right now is the dream that follows? It might sound impossible. It might even sound insane, but stay with me. You've had moments, glimpses, where this so-called life felt strange, out of place, like a déjà vu that clings too long. A dream you wake up from but still feel. A sudden detachment while you're doing something ordinary, where you catch yourself thinking, this doesn't feel real. That wasn't a glitch. It wasn't your imagination. It was a crack in the illusion, a ripple in the veil, a memory trying to return. What if I told you that the world around you is not the beginning of your soul's journey, but a symbolic echo playing out after a much more significant transition? That the pain, the searching, the quiet ache you can't name, all stem from a single forgotten truth: you are already in the afterlife, and you just don't know it. Think about it. If this really was the one true life, if this were the pinnacle of existence, why does it feel like something's missing? Why do you have the innate sense that you came from somewhere else, that you've been here before, or that something greater is just beyond reach, hiding behind the edges of your everyday awareness? Why does your heart long for something it can't quite describe? Why does your intuition whisper secrets your mind refuses to understand? You've been taught to see the world as solid, grounded, absolute. You've been conditioned to believe in the physical, in the five senses, in the grind of linear time, but ancient spiritual systems all point to a different truth. Systems that had no contact with each other, civilizations separated by oceans and eras, somehow reached the same conclusion, that this world is not the real one, it's the veil, a stage, a test, a liminal space between worlds. In Tibetan Buddhism, they speak of the Bardo, an in-between state of consciousness after death. A realm filled with confusion, hallucination, and opportunities for awakening. It's not a myth to them, it's a map, and here's the shocking part. They didn't say the Bardo is afterlife, they said you're in it now. That this world, with its patterns, its looping pain, its familiar suffering, is the dream space your soul has entered after death, trying to remember what's real. Ancient Egyptian teachings mirror this perfectly. They wrote of the Dua, a mirror realm the soul travels through after the body is left behind. A place of illusions, trials, and riddles. Sound familiar? They believed what we call waking life was a shadow of true existence, a temporary maze of symbols the soul must navigate to evolve. You're not in the land of the living, they said. You're in the realm of reflections, a school disguised as a struggle. The early Gnostics, those mystical rebels of early Christianity, spoke of a false world, crafted by lesser forces to entrap divine consciousness in a loop of forgetting. They said you weren't born into reality, you were born into a prison, and the only way out is remembrance. Not salvation through an external figure, but awakening to who you were before the veil. Still think this is life? Even modern science has begun to whisper similar revelations. Quantum physics reveals a world built not from solid matter, but from vibrating fields of probability. Reality doesn't exist until it's observed. Atoms don't settle into form until someone is looking. The universe, at its most fundamental level, behaves like a dream responding to the dreamer's attention. Just like in a lucid dream, the moment you realize it's a dream, everything begins to change. So what does that make this moment, right now, where you're observing me, where you're hearing this? Scientists will tell you your body is made of atoms, but atoms are 99.99% empty space, that everything you think is solid is a field of energy that only feels real. Your hand never actually touches anything, It hovers above matter, interpreting electromagnetic resistance as touch. Everything you see is filtered through your brain, not the thing itself. You never see the world. You see your version of it. So if you're living in a perception, not a thing. If you never actually touch reality, how do you know you're awake? You don't. And that's the point. That's the trap. You've been trained to navigate this space like it's real, to follow its rules, to fear its death, to crave its rewards. But what if the death you fear has already happened? What if you're not on your way to the afterlife? You're inside it. Think about your dreams. In them, you don't know you're dreaming until something bizarre breaks the illusion. Maybe a clock with no hands, a door that leads somewhere impossible, a version of yourself doing something you'd never do. Then you wake up in a rush, heart racing, trying to piece it together. Now ask yourself, how do you know this isn't that? What if every strange coincidence, every unexplainable synchronicity, every aching sense of something deeper, is not a mystery, but a memory? Not a sign of madness, but a sign that you're close to waking up? That what you call reality is the last illusion, and that everything is pushing you toward the edge of remembering? You are not a body moving through time. You are awareness, experiencing a symbolic realm created to mirror your inner state. The world doesn't happen to you. It happens through you, and the moment you realize that, the veil begins to thin. So ask yourself again, what if you've been wrong about life all along? Because once you see this life for what it really is, not a beginning, but a continuation, not a destination, but a simulation, not the real, but the reflection, you can never go back. The loop starts to dissolve, the test becomes clear, and the only question that remains is this: if you're already in the afterlife, what are you going to do with it? What if everything you're seeing, touching, and living through right now is a dream, not the kind you wake up from in the morning, but something deeper, more cosmic? A dream you're having after you've already died. What if what you call your life, this day-to-day sequence of events, faces, roles, and routines, isn't the beginning of your story, but a continuation that began with your last breath in another world? It might sound wild at first, but then again maybe that's exactly what you've always sensed beneath the surface, that something about this world feels too surreal to be solid, too scripted to be random. Close your eyes for a second and remember those strange moments where everything felt slightly off, when time slowed down, when colors looked too vivid, when your own thoughts echoed louder than usual. Have you ever felt like you were watching yourself live? Like there was a version of you behind the version you show the world? Those aren't breakdowns, they're breakthroughs. They're clues that you're not experiencing life in the way you've been taught. You're drifting inside something far more symbolic, a kind of after-death dreamscape, where the real purpose is not survival, but recognition. Ancient wisdom traditions didn't call this world real. In fact, they went out of their way to warn us that what we think of as reality is just the surface, a projection meant to teach us something our true self already knows but forgot. In Hinduism, this realm is known as Maya, the grand illusion. The sages of old weren't being poetic, they weren't speaking metaphorically. They meant it literally. The physical world you're moving through is not the ultimate reality. It's a projection, a dream conjured by the deeper self to process, evolve, remember. Buddhist teachings go even further. They describe samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, as a kind of spiritual sleepwalk. You're not here to build an empire or collect possessions. You're here to wake up inside the dream. According to these teachings, after death, the soul enters a transitional state, not unlike a dream space, fluid, symbolic, filled with echoes of what you believed, feared, and desired in life. But what if that's this? What if you're already there? It would explain so much, wouldn't it? The dreamlike quality of certain memories. How entire years blur together, while specific moments stand out like glowing symbols. Why some people feel familiar the moment you meet them, even though you've never seen their face before. Why you're haunted by longings you can't explain, by a search for meaning that the world can't quite satisfy. These aren't accidents. They're signatures of a deeper process playing out, one designed to jog your memory, one designed to remind you that you're not where you think you are. In ancient Egyptian lore, this concept was given astonishing clarity. The Egyptians believed in the duat, a mysterious realm that exists not before death, but after. In their view, physical death wasn't the beginning of the afterlife. It was merely a door into the real journey. The duat was filled with tests, riddles, and encounters that mirrored the soul's internal state. If your heart was heavy, your path would be hard. If your heart was light, you'd move freely. The world we live in now mirrors this perfectly. What you carry inside shapes everything you encounter. The people you meet reflect your wounds or your wisdom. The situations you attract reflect your beliefs. And whether you move with lightness or suffering is determined by what you've remembered or forgotten about your true nature. The Mayans, too, believed that life was a kind of waking dream, that true vision came not through the eyes, but through the spirit. Their shamans journeyed between realms through trance, and what they saw on the other side wasn't chaotic fantasy. It was structured, coherent, filled with symbols that matched the trials and beauty of earthly existence. Again, not a separate place after death, but a mirror of this one, a parallel that suggests perhaps you are not preparing to die, but remembering that you already have. In modern language, we might call this realm a simulation, a high-resolution dream so detailed, so emotionally immersive, that you've forgotten it isn't the real world. And that's the point. If you knew it was a dream, you wouldn't take it seriously. If you knew it was a projection, you wouldn't lean into the lessons. But once you begin to suspect the nature of your surroundings, everything changes. You start noticing the repeating patterns, the emotional symbolism, the uncanny synchronicities that make no rational sense but feel cosmically orchestrated. You begin to ask, who am I really? Why am I here? And if this is a dream, then who is dreaming me? That question alone is enough to wake up parts of your consciousness that have been dormant for lifetimes. Because here's the truth most avoid. This is not a place of endings, it's a place of recognition. You're not here to accumulate, to win, to conquer. You're here to see, to remember. This is a classroom disguised as a town, a symbolic initiation cloaked in family, work, and identity. But the test isn't about how much you achieve, it's about how deeply you remember. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that this realm doesn't behave like a physical world. It behaves like a dream, vivid, reactive, emotionally charged, symbolic. Just like in a dream, the rules bend around your focus. Where you place your attention determines what grows. Your fears manifest faster than your logic can process them. Your desires sculpt the terrain. People shift depending on what you believe about them. Time folds in on itself. Moments repeat. Themes loop until you finally see what they're trying to show you. There's a reason why your childhood feels like a strange blend of reality and myth. There's a reason why dreams sometimes feel more real than waking life. There's a reason why trauma and love, emotions that exist beyond logic, seem to shape your world more powerfully than reason or planning ever could. Because this isn't a world of objects, it's a world of meanings. This isn't a place of linear growth, it's a spiral, repeating until you see the pattern. So what does that make this place you call home? If it's not the first chapter, if it's not the real world, then what is it? The answer is as haunting as it is freeing. This is the space your soul entered after the last life ended. This is the dream after the breath. The symbolic echo of all your unfinished business. All your hopes, your regrets, your stories still seeking resolution. You are in the in-between, the rehearsal stage, the purgatory that isn't punishment but possibility, and that's what makes it sacred. Because if this is a dream after death, then it's also a chance to wake up while still dreaming, a chance to complete what was left undone, a chance to shift your karmic momentum, not by escaping, but by seeing clearly. If you're willing to see this world not as a final destination but as a test wrapped in illusion, then you gain access to something most souls never touch. The power to choose your next awakening. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are simply inside a deeper sleep than you realized. But something in you is stirring. The symbolic terrain is shifting. The dream is starting to feel thin around the edges. That's not by accident. That's the beginning of remembrance. And once it starts, it can't be undone. Because now you know. This isn't where life begins. This is where you find your way back to who you were before it ended. What if I told you that the space you think you're living in right now, the one filled with familiar faces, routines, pain, and beauty, is not life at all, but a sacred in-between? That everything you're doing, thinking, fearing, chasing, it's all taking place within a realm the ancient mystics warned about, mapped out, and tried to help you navigate. You might have heard of the Bardo. Most people think of it as a mysterious space the soul enters after death, a foggy corridor between lifetimes where consciousness floats in confusion, trying to find its way to the next incarnation. But what if I told you that the Bardo isn't waiting for you at the end of your life, that you're already in it, right now, and that you have been for as long as you can remember? You see, in the Tibetan teachings, the Bardo isn't simply a passage after physical death, it's a space of transition, of disorientation, of deep spiritual opportunity. It's described as a realm where familiar laws of time and space break down, where the mind is flooded with visions, where fear, desire, and memory become more real than form. And here's the unsettling part. Everything about this description matches what you've been experiencing your entire life. Think about it. You were born without memory, a clean slate, no recollection of what came before. And ever since, you've been trying to make sense of a world that doesn't fully explain itself. You've learned to follow routines, attach meaning to names and places, and take part in the story. But deep down, you've always known something was off. You've felt it in the quiet moments, the disconnection, the sudden floods of emotion that seem to come from nowhere, the deep longing for something you can't quite name. You've looked in the mirror and felt like a stranger. You've walked through your days as if in a dream. These aren't side effects of living. These are symptoms of being in the Bardo. Confusion, emotional turbulence, and spiritual amnesia are not signs of failure. They are indicators of where you are. They are the natural experience of a soul navigating the in-between. The Bardo is a realm that mirrors your inner state back to you. It doesn't punish. It reflects. If you are afraid, it shows you fear. If you are attached, it shows you loss. If you are seeking, it shows you illusion. And if you begin to awaken, it starts to bend, to shift, to respond. Have you ever had a dream that felt so real you swore it was actually happening? The Bardo is like that, but layered, multidimensional, emotionally charged. In it, your consciousness is not locked inside your body, it flows outward, shaping your experience through focus and belief. That's why you attract the same patterns over and over. That's why certain lessons keep finding you no matter how far you run. That's why your inner world seems to write the script of your outer world. Because you are not moving through a fixed universe, you are dreaming inside a reflective field of consciousness. The Bardo is not some realm you'll enter after your final breath, it's where you already are, a place of mirrors, of memories, of unresolved threads calling you to remember. The Tibetans didn't describe the Bardo to scare you, they described it to wake you up. Because within the Bardo, everything is symbolic, nothing is static. Time can feel stretched or collapsed, entire lifetimes can pass in a moment, and a single second can echo forever. That's why some experiences seem to drag endlessly, while others vanish in a flash. That's why some wounds feel ancient even if they happened last week, and that's why you sometimes feel like you're remembering something that hasn't happened yet. You are navigating a dream built from echoes, a space shaped by your own vibration. But here's the critical part. The Bardo isn't just a realm of confusion, it's a realm of possibility. Because in this in-between space, everything is more fluid, more malleable. You are not bound by the rigid laws of a material universe. You are navigating a spiritual simulation where what you believe, feel, and focus on becomes your experience. You're not stuck here. You're not being punished. You're being offered a choice. Will you stay asleep and continue looping through fear and forgetfulness? Or will you begin to recognize where you are and reclaim your awareness? Awareness is the key. In the traditional teachings, the soul in the Bardo can either move toward liberation or fall back into another cycle of forgetting. What determines the path? Not merit, not behavior, not even knowledge, but awareness, lucidity. The moment you realize you are dreaming, you are no longer trapped by the dream. The moment you begin to see this world as a symbolic mirror, you stop reacting to it like it's a fixed prison. You begin to respond differently. You soften, you question, you release. and the Bardo responds in kind. This is why your emotions are so volatile here. They aren't just psychological phenomena, they are energetic codes shaping the landscape of your experience. Anger doesn't just color your mood, it shapes your reality. Grief doesn't just weigh on your heart, it magnetizes loss. Joy expands your field. Gratitude lightens your burden. Clarity opens doors that logic could never find, because in the Bardo, the external is a feedback loop of the internal. You are not simply surviving here, you are sculpting. If this sounds strange, look around. Notice how your reality bends to your focus. How the more you fear something, the more it seems to manifest. How your beliefs shape your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose. How life responds to your inner weather more than your outer actions. That's not coincidence. That's the architecture of the Bardo. You are in a place where thoughts become form, where emotions become symbols, where unhealed wounds take shape and walk beside you until you face them. This isn't fantasy, it's ancient instruction. The mystics didn't want you to fear death. They wanted you to realize that you're already in its wake, and that the opportunity is now. You don't need to die to reach the Bardo. You need to awaken within it. And that awakening begins with the simple, sacred question, what if I'm dreaming right now? Ask it when you're hurt. Ask it when you're confused. Ask it when time feels strange or life feels scripted, or you sense the presence of something beyond the veil. Ask it not to escape, but to see more clearly. Because the clearer you see, the more the Bardo reveals. It's not a trick, it's a test of awareness, not to prove your worth, but to remind you that you never left the sacred. You simply forgot you were walking through it. Right now, you're not lost in the world. You're inside a mirror, a corridor, a dream that will either repeat or dissolve depending on one thing, whether you remember who you are. And who you are is not a role, not a name, not even a story. You are awareness itself, experiencing the Bardo not as punishment, but as a chance to wake up and walk yourself home. What if I told you that what you're calling life is actually a carefully constructed mirror, a realm not built for permanence, but for transformation? That this space you're navigating, with all its familiar faces, routines, struggles, and moments of awe, is not the destination your soul has been longing for, but the symbolic terrain your consciousness entered after a far greater transition. The ancient Egyptians understood this, and they left behind one of the most intricate and powerful blueprints ever recorded for those willing to remember. They didn't call this realm Earth. They called it the Duat, the mirror realm. To most, the Duat is mistaken for the Egyptian version of the afterlife, a mystical underworld filled with gods, judgment halls, and serpentine rivers. But to those who read between the lines, who don't take symbols at face value, the truth becomes unavoidable. The Duat wasn't just what came after death, it was the dream world within death. A reflection of consciousness, layered in illusion, designed to awaken the soul to its true nature. And what if I told you you're already inside it? When the Egyptians spoke of the Duat, they weren't describing hell, they weren't warning of torment. They were mapping out a journey, a sacred trial, where the soul must pass through a world of symbols and shadows, not to be punished, but to be remembered. They believed that this in-between space, this mirrored realm, was filled with both light and darkness, clarity and chaos, peace and peril. Not because it was evil, but because it was a test. A sacred proving ground where illusion reigned for one purpose, to stir the soul into seeing. Hieroglyphs etched on tomb walls and temple columns tell us this over and over again. But we've forgotten how to read them. We've taken their metaphors literally and missed their hidden meanings. When they speak of the boat of Ra traveling through the night sky, when they show Anubis weighing the heart against the feather, when they illustrate winding paths, shape-shifting deities, and doors that open into impossible places, they are not describing a physical geography of death. They are describing the landscape of consciousness within the Duat. And this landscape was never somewhere far away. It was always here, disguised as your life. Look closer at the images. The scales of judgment are not weighing deeds. They are weighing your internal state. The feather isn't measuring morality, it's measuring lightness, your attachments, your heaviness, your illusions. If the heart is burdened by identity, ego, fear, regret, the path becomes difficult. If it is light, unclenched, aware, willing to surrender, the soul passes through with ease. This wasn't just a story to scare people into behaving. It was a psychological map, written in code. A mirror held up to every soul brave enough to remember where they really are. And where you are right now is not a world of solid matter and fixed events. You are inside a place designed to reflect your consciousness back to you. The duat is not a punishment. It is a symbolic realm structured to respond to your vibration. Just like a mirror, it doesn't create anything. It simply reveals. If you bring fear, it shows you fear. If you bring truth, it shows you clarity. If you bring confusion, it becomes a maze. And if you bring awareness, it becomes a path. This is why ancient texts describe the duat as a place of riddles. Because nothing is given directly, everything is hidden behind metaphor. Your relationships, your recurring struggles, your strange moments of synchronicity, these aren't random or meaningless. They are the riddles of the duat, designed to reflect the inner state of your soul, and just like a dream, they will keep repeating until you interpret them correctly. But here's the part they don't teach in school. The Egyptians didn't believe you entered the duat after your body was laid to rest. They believed that life itself was the duat. That from the moment you opened your eyes in this world, you were already inside the corridor of reflection, already passing through the veils, already being weighed, not by some god in the sky, but by the quality of your own being, your every thought, emotion, and choice echoing through a symbolic landscape built by your own soul. That's why the duat is described as a world of illusion, not because it is false, but because it is fluid, ever-shifting, shaped by what you bring to it. You are not walking through a fixed external world, you are journeying through a psychic terrain. And the trials you face here are not punishments, they are mirrors. Each difficulty you encounter is asking you one question: do you see it for what it is? Do you understand the symbol, or are you lost in the form? This is the heart of the duat. It is not about surviving, it is about awakening. And awakening doesn't mean escaping the duat. It means seeing through it while still inside it. The ancient initiates knew this. They didn't fear the duat, they trained for it. Through ritual, meditation, and symbolic death, they practiced navigating the dream. They wanted to be lucid within it, so that when the trials appeared, they wouldn't be swallowed by the illusion. They would walk through it with eyes open. And now it's your turn. Look around. The strange patterns in your life, the symbols that keep reappearing, the relationships that break you open or hold you still, the nights when your dreams bleed into your waking hours, the gut feelings that warn you, the days that feel like rewinds of something you've already lived. These are not coincidences. They are glyphs written in your personal duat. They are the echo of your own soul speaking to itself in the only language it can use here: symbol, sensation, reflection. There is no script in the duat, only feedback. You're not being led by fate, you're being responded to by form. You are both the traveler and the terrain. And the more you become aware of this, the more fluid everything becomes. Judgment stops being something to fear. Trials stop being obstacles. They become markers, opportunities, reminders that you are not here to be a victim of the dream, but a lucid participant in it. This is why the duat is not hell. Hell punishes. The duat reveals. It shows you yourself, not the self you've been taught to perform, but the self that was there before your name, your memories, your beliefs, the self that existed before the world told you who to be. And it does so through layers of illusion so convincing that most souls forget where they are. They mistake the mirror for the truth, the symbol for the source. But you, right now, are beginning to remember. You are not lost. You are not being judged by an external force. You are being invited, again and again, to see clearly. To see that everything you encounter in this space is a clue, a key. A chance to remember that the duat was never meant to trap you. It was meant to free you. And when you finally see it for what it is, the world starts to look different. People become symbols, conflict becomes curriculum, time becomes pliable, death loses its grip. Because you are no longer under the spell of the dream. You are lucid inside the illusion. You are awake within the mirror. So the next time life feels strange, as if you're walking through a script that's not entirely yours, pause, look deeper, ask yourself what the symbol means, ask yourself what part of you it's reflecting. Because this isn't a random world, this is the duat, the sacred terrain of your own soul, and it will keep showing you what you need to see, until you finally remember who it was that chose to step inside the mirror in the first place. What if I told you that the world you're living in, this very moment, is not what it appears to be, that the sky above you, the ground beneath you, the rules you think you must follow, all of it is part of a carefully woven illusion designed not to guide your freedom, but to distract you from it? What if everything around you is part of a system that isn't here to liberate your soul, but to contain it? There is an ancient truth hidden in forgotten scrolls and scattered fragments of wisdom that dares to whisper what most religions would never say out loud: that Earth itself may be a dream prison, and you're only free once you see through it. Long ago, before dogma took root, there were seekers who saw the world differently. They were called the Gnostics. Their understanding of life wasn't built on blind faith, it was built on inner knowing, on gnosis. They didn't accept the world at face value, they questioned it deeply, and what they discovered was both unsettling and liberating. They saw that this realm we call physical reality was not the creation of the ultimate divine source, but the byproduct of a lesser intelligence, a distortion, a copy of a higher world, a counterfeit. They spoke of a false creator, a force not of light, but of shadow, one that fashioned this dense, material plane not as a playground for the soul, but as a cage. Not out of love, but out of ignorance. A force that didn't understand the true source, and therefore replicated its form without its essence. The world we live in, they said, is the result of that replication, a simulation of divine order, but missing the one ingredient that makes anything truly real: remembrance of spirit. And you've felt this, haven't you? That sensation of being trapped in repetition, that dull ache in your soul that tells you there's something more, but you can't quite access it. The feeling that you're playing a game without knowing the rules, or worse, that the rules keep changing the moment you start to understand them. These are not signs of personal failure. They are the friction created by living in a dream that isn't yours, a system designed to keep you looking outward while the truth lies buried within. The Gnostics warned of entities called archons, interdimensional forces that feed on unconsciousness, not monsters hiding under your bed, but distortions of thought and perception. They don't attack with weapons, they manipulate belief, they whisper lies into your mind that sound like your own voice. You're not good enough, you need more, you are separate, you are unworthy. You are just a body. And every time you accept these lies, you tighten the chains around your own awareness. The archons don't need to imprison your body, they only need to imprison your mind. Their power lies in the veil, the thick fog of forgetfulness that you pass through before entering this realm, and the most dangerous part of that fog is not that it makes you forget where you came from, it's that it convinces you you've always been here. That this world of birth and decay, fear and desire, war and suffering, is normal. That the pain is just part of life. That being spiritually numb is just adulthood. But it's not normal, and it's not all there is. Beneath the veil is your true self, a spark of divine awareness that existed before the world was born and will exist long after it ends, a self that remembers, a self that knows. But to access it, you must wake up within the dream, because as long as you believe this world is the ultimate reality, you will keep circling the maze, playing out the same karmic dramas, feeling the same ancient ache with no name. This is not to say the world has no beauty. Even in a mirror, you can catch glimpses of the real light. Nature, love, moments of awe and silence, all of these are echoes of the source shining through the distortion. But they are fleeting, aren't they? Like brief memories from a place you once knew but can't quite return to. They're reminders, not destinations, hints, not homes. They are here to wake you up, not to lull you back to sleep. The prison isn't made of stone. It's made of assumptions. It's built from everything you've been taught to believe without ever examining. That time is linear, that matter is solid, that death is final, that your worth must be earned, that truth is outside of you. These are the bars. And the moment you start questioning them, the cracks begin to form. Awakening isn't a feeling. It's a shift in perception. A moment when you realize the dream is not the source. When you stop reacting to the world like it holds your answers, and you start turning inward. When you stop chasing distractions and start listening to the silence inside you that has never wavered, the one that's been waiting patiently for you to notice it again. This is why the system works so hard to keep you busy. It wants your attention scattered. It wants you obsessed with status, approval, material gain, endless scrolling, emotional loops. Because when your focus is fragmented, you can't see the pattern. But the pattern is there. Look closely. You'll notice how the same lessons keep returning under different disguises. How the same feelings echo through different relationships. How time seems to circle back instead of moving forward. That's not failure. That's the design of the dream prison. It's meant to loop until you see it. And once you do, the dream begins to change. The walls don't vanish overnight, but they lose their power. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming a conscious participant. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" You begin to understand that your pain isn't punishment, it's a message, that your longing isn't weakness, it's a compass, that your suffering isn't your identity, it's the friction between who you've been told you are and who you truly are beneath the veil. The Gnostics were not trying to make you fear the world, they were trying to help you see through it. They weren't nihilists, they were mystics. They understood that awakening doesn't mean escaping the dream, it means seeing it for what it is, and choosing to live from the part of you that cannot be manipulated, the part that remembers, the part that cannot be caged. So ask yourself, what do you really know to be true? Not what you've been taught, not what you've repeated to fit in, but what you feel deep in your being when the world gets quiet. That knowing, the one that doesn't speak in words but in resonance, is your thread out of the maze. This is not the end. It never was. This world is not a punishment. It's a puzzle. And the moment you begin to remember that, the archons lose their grip, the veil begins to thin. And what once felt like a prison begins to reveal itself as a test, one you were born to pass, not through struggle, but through sight. Have you ever had that strange feeling that you've been here before? Not in the sense of routine, but in that haunting, deep-boned sensation that the moment unfolding in front of you is not new at all, that it's already happened? A certain street corner, a phrase someone speaks, a glance shared with a stranger, suddenly it hits you, a jolt, a pause in time, a whisper of something familiar without a source. You shake it off, tell yourself it's just déjà vu, but what if it isn't? What if those moments are not glitches in your brain, but clues, cracks in the illusion, slivers of light poking through the dream? You've been told that memory is linear, that time moves in one direction, that your life is a clean slate progressing from point A to point B. But the truth is, you've always known better. You've always felt the slippage. You've woken up in the middle of the night with the eerie sensation that this world doesn't quite hold. You've watched the clock tick strangely, felt time bend in moments of deep presence or trauma. You've walked into places you've never seen and somehow known where everything was. You've felt a connection to someone so instantly, so intensely, it made no sense by conventional logic. These are not accidents. These are the remnants of something deeper, ghosts of memory leaking through the cracks in the veil. The dream you're living in is intricate. It's wrapped in patterns and reinforced by repetition. But no dream is perfect. And like any illusion, this one has its glitches. Moments when the script falters. When reality feels too scripted or surreal. When your inner knowing rises faster than your rational mind can explain. Those experiences that leave you asking, how did I know that? Why does this feel so familiar? Why am I certain I've lived this before? These are ruptures in the narrative. They are symptoms of something extraordinary. Your soul remembering itself. You were not born in total amnesia by chance. The moment you entered this realm, a veil descended. One that dulled the sharpness of memory, that softened the voice of your inner knowing, that clouded the certainty of who you truly are. But memory, true memory, the kind that doesn't come from the brain, but from the soul, can't be erased. It can only be suppressed. And suppression always leaks. It leaks in déjà vu. It leaks in dreams that feel more real than waking life. It leaks in the uncanny synchronicities that stack up until you can no longer call them coincidence. And you've felt it, haven't you? That something is off. that the rules you've been taught don't quite add up, that there's a deeper logic hiding beneath the surface, a kind of energetic fingerprint to life that no textbook can explain. You've caught it in the still moments, when you're staring at the sky, lost in silence, and suddenly feel like you're peering through something instead of at it. That's not imagination. That's not you being overly sensitive. That's you brushing up against the boundary of the illusion, the edge of the simulation. Because the truth is, the world around you is not as solid as it appears. It is a reactive, symbolic field that bends and twists in alignment with your inner state. And your memories, your true memories, are not locked away in a file cabinet in your brain. They exist as frequencies, as vibrations encoded into the essence of your consciousness. The soul doesn't remember in words or pictures. It remembers through feeling, through resonance, through recognition. And that's why certain things hit you so hard without reason. That's why a melody can make you weep, a scent can transport you, a place can unlock grief you never knew you carried. These are not fragments of this life. They are echoes from what came before. The illusion is built to keep you distracted. It feeds you a constant stream of noise, roles to play, fears to manage, goals to chase. It surrounds you with mirrors, hoping you'll mistake the reflections for the real thing. But in its haste, it cannot seal every crack. And those cracks are your lifelines. They are the subtle tremors that shake your certainty and open a doorway to a deeper truth. The truth that you are not just a person experiencing random life events. You are a vast, eternal being navigating a symbolic realm built on forgetting. And the forgetting isn't punishment, it's design. You chose to forget so that the act of remembering would be sacred. So that when you did feel those glitches, those anomalies in the matrix, you wouldn't ignore them. You would follow them. Let them lead you. Because each one is a breadcrumb left by your soul to guide you back home. Déjà vu is not your mind playing tricks. It's your awareness brushing up against the edge of time. It's your consciousness reaching across dimensions to whisper, "You've been here before." Maybe not in body, but in essence. Maybe not in this form, but in presence. That eerie familiarity you can't explain? It's not random, it's not nonsense. It's a signal, a memory too deep for words, too real for logic. And what about the sense of timelessness you sometimes feel? Those moments when hours slip by in seconds, or when minutes stretch into eternity, that's another crack. Another reminder that time here isn't real, it's experiential, subjective, tied to consciousness. That's why you age in body but feel the same inside. That's why you can be in your 30s or 60s or 90s and still feel like a child in certain moments. Because your soul hasn't aged. Only the costume has. The essence remains unchanged. And perhaps the biggest glitch of all, the feeling that none of this is quite real. That you're playing a role in a story you didn't fully write. That you're watching yourself go through motions that feel pre-scripted. That's not paranoia. That's perception. That's your soul tugging on the curtain, reminding you that behind the dream there is a deeper layer of truth. One you've always known, one you've always carried, but that this world has worked hard to make you forget. You see, you've never truly believed this was all there is. Even as a child, you felt the mystery. You looked around at the world and sensed the strangeness. Maybe it scared you, maybe it fascinated you. Maybe you tried to ignore it just to fit in. But it never left you. It stayed quiet, tucked beneath the noise, waiting for the cracks to appear, waiting for you to start asking the questions you were told not to ask. And now, here you are, asking, remembering. So the next time you feel the glitch, the déjà vu, the slippage, the strange sense of being both inside your body and watching from above, don't run from it, don't explain it away, lean in. It's not a malfunction, it's a key. It's proof that the veil is thin and your soul is waking up, that the illusion is starting to break, that you're not lost inside a dream, you're waking within it. And once you see that, you'll never unsee it, because memory doesn't disappear, it waits. And now that yours has started to return, the dream will never feel quite the same again. What if I told you that nothing you see around you, not the walls, the floor beneath your feet, not even your own body, is truly solid? What if the entire physical world you've come to accept as real is not made of matter at all, but of energy, vibrating patterns, and quantum echoes projected from a field far beyond your senses? You've been taught that reality is fixed, that things exist independently whether you observe them or not. But science has quietly been unraveling that illusion, and what it's discovering sounds less like hard logic and more like ancient mysticism finally catching up with modern physics. Quantum mechanics, often dismissed as too strange to apply to everyday life, has revealed something astonishing. At the smallest scales of existence, the world doesn't behave like a machine. It behaves like a dream. Electrons do not have fixed positions. Photons do not travel in straight lines unless watched. Particles seem to exist in multiple places at once. They flicker in and out of being. And the moment you look at them, really observe them, they collapse into one reality. That's not science fiction, that's the observer effect. The universe is not happening to you, it is responding to you. You've likely heard the phrase, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? But quantum physics pushes this even further. If no one is there to observe the tree, is it even there at all? Subatomic particles remain in a state of possibility, a cloud of potential, until they are measured, until there is consciousness present. Observation isn't passive, it's participatory. It changes what is. Now pause and think about that, because this goes far beyond particle behavior. This means reality itself is not objective, it's reactive. The world isn't simply there for you to navigate. It's being shaped by your attention, your focus, your beliefs, your energy. The deeper you look, the more the line between observer and observed dissolves. And suddenly, you are not just a character in a story, you are the co-author, writing the script through your awareness. This is where quantum theory begins to echo ancient spiritual teachings. Long before physicists split atoms, mystics across time have claimed the world is a projection, a dream made of light and thought, shaped by the observer's state of consciousness. That this realm is not the origin point, but the reflection, not the source, but the symbol. And now, science is catching up to that truth. Take non-locality. When two particles become entangled, they remain connected across vast distances. Change one, and the other responds instantly, not through any signal, but through something deeper, an invisible field that connects all things beyond time and space. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, because it shattered everything we thought we knew about separation. But to the ancient seers, it wasn't spooky at all. It was obvious. Everything is connected. The soul is not isolated. Consciousness is not bound by the body. What you do to one aspect of life ripples through the whole. You felt this too, that eerie sensation of thinking about someone seconds before they call, of knowing something before it happens, of feeling another person's emotions without a word being spoken. These are not anomalies, they are reminders. Non-locality is not just a property of particles. It is the signature of a universe that isn't external, but internalized. It's not out there, it's mirrored in you. And what about matter itself? The deeper we go into the fabric of reality, the less solid it becomes. What we once thought were building blocks, atoms, protons, quarks, turn out to be mostly empty space. But even the stuff that remains isn't matter in any classical sense. It's energy, patterns, frequencies, the illusion of solidity held together by fields and forces we still barely understand. You're not made of matter, you're made of motion. You are vibration. And so is everything else. This brings us to one of the most provocative ideas emerging from both quantum theory and spiritual insight, the holographic universe. The concept is as wild as it is elegant, that the entire universe is a projection, that every part contains the whole, and that what you experience as three-dimensional space is actually information encoded on a boundary far beyond your perception. Think of a hologram. Cut it into 100 pieces, and each piece still contains the entire image. Now imagine that same principle applied to the cosmos. You're not looking at reality, you're looking into it, into a code that's being rendered in real time, based on your consciousness. If this sounds like simulation theory, it is. But not in the cold, digital sense, some suggest. This isn't a lifeless computer simulation. It's a conscious, symbolic interface, built for learning, healing, remembering. You're not trapped in a lifeless machine, you're immersed in a soul-based simulation, a kind of energetic classroom, where the physical world is merely the user interface. What you see, feel, and interact with is just the skin of a deeper system designed not to limit you, but to awaken you. Every interaction you have, every conflict, connection, coincidence, is part of that holographic feedback loop. You are not reacting to a fixed reality. You are responding to your own encoded projections. That's why the same patterns follow you. That's why unresolved emotions keep manifesting in different forms. That's why your beliefs shape your world more than your circumstances do. Because reality isn't solid, it's symbolic. The afterlife, then, isn't a place you go to. It's a system you're already in. One that responds not to your body, but to your vibration. You didn't land here by accident. You entered this simulation for a reason, to navigate the layers of illusion and find your way back to truth. And the you doing that navigating is not your personality. It's the observer behind your thoughts, the silent witness, the presence that watches but is never caught. Have you noticed how the deeper you go into your awareness, the more dreamlike the world becomes? How moments of intense presence seem to slow time? How reality bends when you act from your highest truth? That's not imagination. That's mastery. You are beginning to see the source code. You are starting to interact with the hologram, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a conscious participant. This isn't a metaphor, it's a system. One that has been veiled with rules, conditioning, and distractions to keep you asleep. But the moment you begin to see through the veil, even just a little, the simulation responds. The patterns shift, synchronicities increase, dreams become messages, time begins to melt, and what once felt rigid begins to flow. Because you're not just in the dream, you're lucid inside it. So when you feel the world bend in strange ways, when you encounter a moment so surreal it feels scripted, when your thoughts begin to mirror your reality faster than you can explain, don't dismiss it. It's not coincidence, it's communication. It's your soul showing you the truth you've always suspected, that this isn't the beginning, that you're already in the afterlife, that the simulation is real, and that your awakening is the exit key. Where were you before this? Before the name you answer to, before the face in the mirror, before the timeline you call your life began, where were you? It's a question that lingers in the background of your existence, whispering through the quiet spaces, echoing in moments when time slows or identity slips. You've asked it in different ways. Sometimes as a child staring out a car window, sometimes in the middle of the night when the silence grows too loud, sometimes when death brushes close and reminds you that this life is temporary. But no matter how often it comes, the answer always feels just out of reach. A sensation you can't name, a place you can't locate, a knowing you can't explain, and yet, there's a part of you that does remember. Not with words or images, but with resonance. There are places you've never been that feel like home, people you've just met who feel familiar. Emotions that swell up from nowhere, as if you're grieving something you've never lost, or longing for something you've never had. These aren't random, they are the fingerprints of a memory you were never meant to carry in full, not because it's unimportant, but because forgetting was part of the agreement. You've been taught to view memory as a function of the brain, as something stored in neurons and retrieved like files. But your soul carries a different kind of memory, one that exists beyond form, not in the mind, but in the field of consciousness that animates the body. And when you entered this space, the one you now call life, you didn't bring all of that memory with you. You brought a spark, a trace, a coded whisper buried beneath layers of identity and illusion. The rest was veiled, not stolen, not erased, but intentionally obscured. You stepped into this realm under amnesia, and that forgetting wasn't punishment, it was purpose. The question isn't just, where were you before? The deeper question is, why don't you remember? And the answer, strange as it may seem, is because remembering too soon would compromise everything. This space you're in right now is not the original reality. It's a symbolic interface, a realm of mirrors and metaphor, designed to reflect you back to yourself. And within that design, amnesia is not a flaw. It's the first and most sacred condition. Imagine trying to grow without contrast. Imagine being born with full awareness of your divine nature, knowing every past life, every lesson, every truth. Where would the challenge be? Where would the mystery be? How would transformation occur? You'd already be whole, and if you already felt whole, you wouldn't move, you wouldn't seek, you wouldn't evolve. The entire structure of this experience depends on one thing: the act of not knowing, so that you may remember through experience. Amnesia is the sacred veil that makes growth possible. It strips away the safety of certainty and throws you into a world that demands you choose, feel, fall, and rise, all without the cheat codes of cosmic knowledge. It places you in roles you didn't expect, hands you challenges you didn't anticipate, and waits to see how your soul responds. Not for judgment, not for reward, but for realization. This isn't a test with right or wrong answers. It's a mirror that shows you who you become when you think you're alone. And yet, the memory leaks. You've felt it in dreams that feel more like memories than fiction. In the flash of recognition when you hear ancient languages or step into temples built before your birth. In the silence between your thoughts when you know that you are more than this body, this story, this identity. These aren't fantasies, they are echoes. They are what happens when the veil thins, when your soul begins to stir, when the illusion starts to break down not through force, but through the power of inquiry. Because the question itself, where was I before, is the first key. Most people don't ask it, or they ask it and quickly shut it down, told by the world that such thoughts are unproductive, silly, dangerous. But you didn't shut it down, you're still asking. And that means something deep within you remembers that there's something to remember. That the story didn't start here. That your soul has walked this path before, and will walk it again. That this place, no matter how vivid, is not the full picture. The veil was placed for your benefit, but it was never meant to be permanent. It exists to give meaning to your choices, depth to your suffering, color to your joy. And as you grow in awareness, the veil begins to thin, not because someone lifts it for you, but because your frequency begins to rise beyond it. You begin to notice the patterns, the synchronicities, the symbols embedded in every struggle. And suddenly, what once felt like randomness becomes revelation. You begin to feel your way back into remembrance. And that's the path of soul evolution, not to bypass the forgetting, but to move through it consciously, to awaken not in spite of the amnesia, but because of it. Because when you start to remember who you are, not from a book or a teacher, but from your own resonance, everything changes. Life no longer feels like a sentence. It becomes a sacred puzzle. Each experience, no matter how painful, becomes part of a larger pattern designed to wake you up, layer by layer, moment by moment. This is why children often remember things adults forget, before the conditioning sets in, before language and logic drown out intuition. They speak of stars, of past lives, of invisible friends that aren't so imaginary, not because they're confused, but because they haven't fully absorbed the veil yet. And then, slowly, society teaches them to forget, to doubt, to close off that channel. But for some, the memory never fully goes away. It returns in waves, in crisis, in love, in silence. And for you, it's returning now. That strange ache you've carried all your life, the one you couldn't explain, is homesickness, not for a place, but for a state of being, a state where you were whole, seen, known beyond words. And the reason nothing here ever fully satisfies you is because you're trying to remember something this world cannot offer, but only point you toward. The relationships you crave, the freedom you seek, the beauty that moves you to tears, all of it is a reflection of the original truth you've temporarily forgotten, that you are a spark of the infinite, wrapped in temporary flesh, playing a sacred game of remembering in a world of forgetting. So don't be discouraged by your lack of memory. It doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're brave. Brave enough to enter the maze blindfolded. Brave enough to trust that even without the map, your soul would find its way, and it is. You're not here to recall every detail of before. You're here to feel your way home, to walk through the illusion with your heart open, to learn not by memorizing truth, but by becoming it. And every time you pause and ask that ancient question, where was I before? You crack the illusion just a little more. You let in more light. You remember not with your mind, but with your being. You came here on purpose, and forgetting was part of the plan. Where were you before this? Before the name you answer to? Before the face in the mirror? Before the timeline you call your life began? Where were you? It's a question that lingers in the background of your existence, whispering through the quiet spaces, echoing in moments when time slows or identity slips. You've asked it in different ways. Sometimes, as a child staring out a car window, sometimes in the middle of the night when the silence grows too loud, sometimes when death brushes close and reminds you that this life is temporary. But no matter how often it comes, the answer always feels just out of reach. A sensation you can't name, a place you can't locate, a knowing you can't explain. And yet, there's a part of you that does remember, not with words or images, but with resonance. There are places you've never been that feel like home, people you've just met who feel familiar. Emotions that swell up from nowhere as if you're grieving something you've never lost, or longing for something you've never had. These aren't random. They are the fingerprints of a memory you were never meant to carry in full. Not because it's unimportant, but because forgetting was part of the agreement. You've been taught to view memory as a function of the brain, as something stored in neurons and retrieved like files. But your soul carries a different kind of memory, one that exists beyond form, not in the mind, but in the field of consciousness that animates the body. And when you entered this space, the one you now call life, you didn't bring all of that memory with you. You brought a spark, a trace, a coded whisper buried beneath layers of identity and illusion. The rest was veiled, not stolen, not erased, but intentionally obscured. You stepped into this realm under amnesia, and that forgetting wasn't punishment, it was purpose. The question isn't just, where were you before? The deeper question is, why don't you remember? And the answer, strange as it may seem, is because remembering too soon would compromise everything. This space you're in right now is not the original reality. It's a symbolic interface, a realm of mirrors and metaphor, designed to reflect you back to yourself. And within that design, amnesia is not a flaw. It's the first and most sacred condition. Imagine trying to grow without contrast. Imagine being born with full awareness of your divine nature, knowing every past life, every lesson, every truth. Where would the challenge be? Where would the mystery be? How would transformation occur? You'd already be whole. And if you already felt whole, you wouldn't move. You wouldn't seek. You wouldn't evolve. The entire structure of this experience depends on one thing, the act of not knowing, so that you may remember through experience. Amnesia is the sacred veil that makes growth possible. It strips away the safety of certainty and throws you into a world that demands you choose, feel, fall, and rise, all without the cheat codes of cosmic knowledge. It places you in roles you didn't expect, hands you challenges you didn't anticipate, and waits to see how your soul responds. Not for judgment, not for reward, but for realization. This isn't a test with right or wrong answers. It's a mirror that shows you who you become when you think you're alone. And yet, the memory leaks. You've felt it in dreams that feel more like memories than fiction, in the flash of recognition when you hear ancient languages or step into temples built before your birth, in the silence between your thoughts when you know that you are more than this body, this story, this identity. These aren't fantasies, they are echoes. They are what happens when the veil thins, when your soul begins to stir, when the illusion starts to break down not through force, but through the power of inquiry. Because the question itself, where was I before, is the first key. Most people don't ask it, or they ask it and quickly shut it down, told by the world that such thoughts are unproductive, silly, dangerous. But you didn't shut it down, you're still asking. And that means something deep within you remembers that there's something to remember, that the story didn't start here, that your soul has walked this path before and will walk it again, that this place, no matter how vivid, is not the full picture. The veil was placed for your benefit, but it was never meant to be permanent. It exists to give meaning to your choices, depth to your suffering, color to your joy. And as you grow in awareness, the veil begins to thin, not because someone lifts it for you, but because your frequency begins to rise beyond it. You begin to notice the patterns, the synchronicities, the symbols embedded in every struggle. And suddenly, what once felt like randomness becomes revelation. You begin to feel your way back into remembrance. And that's the path of soul evolution. Not to bypass the forgetting, but to move through it consciously. To awaken not in spite of the amnesia, but because of it. Because when you start to remember who you are, not from a book or a teacher, but from your own resonance, everything changes. Life no longer feels like a sentence. It becomes a sacred puzzle. Each experience, no matter how painful, becomes part of a larger pattern designed to wake you up, layer by layer, moment by moment. This is why children often remember things adults forget. Before the conditioning sets in, before language and logic drown out intuition, they speak of stars, of past lives, of invisible friends that aren't so imaginary. Not because they're confused, but because they haven't fully absorbed the veil yet. And then slowly, society teaches them to forget, to doubt, to close off that channel. But for some, the memory never fully goes away. It returns in waves, in crisis, in love, in silence. And for you, it's returning now. That strange ache you've carried all your life, the one you couldn't explain, is homesickness. Not for a place, but for a state of being, a state where you were whole, seen, known beyond words. And the reason nothing here ever fully satisfies you is because you're trying to remember something this world cannot offer, but only point you toward. The relationships you crave, the freedom you seek, the beauty that moves you to tears, all of it is a reflection of the original truth you've temporarily forgotten, that you are a spark of the infinite, wrapped in temporary flesh, playing a sacred game of remembering in a world of forgetting. So don't be discouraged by your lack of memory. It doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're brave. Brave enough to enter the maze blindfolded, brave enough to trust that even without the map, your soul would find its way. And it is. You're not here to recall every detail of before. You're here to feel your way home, to walk through the illusion with your heart open, to learn not by memorizing truth, but by becoming it. And every time you pause and ask that ancient question, where was I before? You crack the illusion just a little more. You let in more light. You remember not with your mind, but with your being. You came here on purpose, and forgetting was part of the plan. What if I told you that heaven and hell aren't waiting for you after death, but that you're moving through them right now, moment by moment, thought by thought? That these aren't places carved into some distant dimension, but living states of consciousness shaped by your awareness, your energy, your vibration. That every time you descend into guilt, fear, anger, or shame, you are not just feeling low, you are entering a frequency, one that shapes the landscape of your reality and distorts your perception like a fog. And that every time you rise into love, gratitude, peace, or truth, you are tuning into something higher, a space that feels lighter not because it's imaginary, but because it's real. You've been taught that heaven is somewhere far away, a reward after the pain of this world is over. That hell is a place of fire and punishment, buried deep beneath the earth or beyond the stars. But what if those ideas are only symbols, simplified metaphors for something far more profound? The truth is, these realms aren't waiting on the other side of a final breath. They are here now, vibrating all around you, woven into the fabric of the afterlife simulation you are already inside. Heaven and hell are not destinations. They are frequencies. They are energetic fields that exist within and around your consciousness. Fields that respond to your inner state with stunning precision. This is not philosophy. This is physics. Vibration is law. Everything you experience, every interaction, thought, memory, and emotion is encoded with a frequency. And that frequency determines your alignment, your location within the spiritual matrix. Just as a radio cannot pick up a signal unless it's tuned to the right station, you cannot access higher realms of perception unless your internal state aligns with those higher frequencies. And so you're not on Earth in the traditional sense. You're inside a vibratory field that mirrors your frequency back to you in symbolic form. When you feel light, when your thoughts are aligned, when you choose compassion over fear, you are not just being a good person. You are moving through heaven. You are resonating with truth. You are tuning into the harmonic frequencies that make the veil thinner, the patterns clearer, the path smoother. And when you fall into judgment, envy, resentment, or self-hatred, you are not being punished. You are simply descending into the denser layers of this same field, a version of hell not ruled by flames, but by separation. Hell is not punishment for your sins. It's the natural result of vibrating out of harmony with your own divine nature. It's what happens when you believe you are cut off from love, when you live from fear, when you forget who you are. And because this realm is a projection of consciousness, the hell you enter is not someone else's prison, it is your own echo, the patterns loop, the pain compounds. The world reflects back everything you're holding until you awaken from the distortion. That's not cruelty. That's alchemy. Likewise, heaven is not the reward for a pious life. It is the natural result of remembering your essence. When you live in alignment, the world responds. You notice the signs. You feel supported. The weight lifts, not because life becomes easy, but because you become light. You begin to understand that joy is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of awareness. That peace doesn't come from control, but from surrender. That love isn't earned, but remembered. And the more you align with that knowing, the more heaven unfolds, not in the sky, but in your experience. You've already seen both of these frequencies play out. You've lived through moments of hell, when everything felt heavy, when your thoughts turned on you, when the world seemed gray and empty and relentless. And you've tasted heaven, when a quiet moment made you weep, when someone's kindness felt like salvation, when you laughed so freely you forgot your name. These weren't hallucinations. They were shifts in resonance, proof that the afterlife isn't some future realm. You are walking through it every day. There is no waiting, no final judgment, no gatekeeper. You are not here to pass a test and then go somewhere else. You are already inside the test. You are inside the field. And your frequency is the key that moves you up or down, deeper or higher, from clarity to confusion and back again. This is why your emotional state matters. Not because feelings are moral, but because they are magnetic. They pull you toward realities that match their vibration. And this is not about bypassing pain, it's about transforming it. You are not meant to force joy or fake peace. You are meant to transmute your frequency by becoming conscious of what you're carrying. When you bring presence to anger, it teaches you about boundaries. When you sit with sadness, it reveals your depth. When you honor your grief, it reconnects you to love. Every negative emotion is not a block to heaven. It is a doorway. But only if you meet it without judgment. The world teaches you to suppress, to distract, to push away discomfort. But the path to frequency shift is not escape, it's awareness. You cannot rise into higher states without first acknowledging where you are. Pretending to be peaceful while suppressing rage is not heaven, it's spiritual stagnation. True heaven begins with honesty, with the raw, humbling act of sitting in your own storm and choosing to feel anyway, choosing to open anyway, choosing to soften even when everything in you wants to close. This is why the afterlife field you're in feels so challenging. It's not because you're broken, it's because this realm is built to mirror your vibration, not hide it. You can't lie to it, you can't trick it, you can only raise your frequency by shifting your internal state. That's what makes this such a powerful space for evolution. Everything here responds. Everything is feedback. You are constantly being shown where you are, not to shame you, but to offer you choice. And every choice matters. Every thought is a frequency. Every word is a wave. Every act of love, no matter how small, ripples through this field like light cutting through fog. You're not powerless here. You are powerful beyond measure, because you are not reacting to the world. You are co-creating it through your state of being. That's the secret the world tries to hide. That you are not waiting to die to reach heaven. You are learning how to carry it within you. Likewise, you are not doomed to hell. You are navigating its frequencies every time you fall out of alignment. And the beauty of this realization is that you are never stuck. No matter how low you've gone, no matter how dark the energy, you can always shift, with breath, with presence, with intention, with the quiet, radical decision to come back to truth. You don't need a priest to bless you. You don't need permission to rise. You don't need to die to reach the light. You need only to remember that you are the tuning fork, and the field is responding to you. That every moment you choose love over fear, awareness over reaction, alignment over illusion, you are not just improving your life, you are literally ascending through layers of the afterlife in real time. You are not on your way to heaven or hell, you are already there, moving through its layers with every breath, every emotion, every choice. And the more conscious you become, the more control you have over where you are. You are not here to earn salvation, you are here to embody it. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about life's sequence is backward? That the neat, linear progression of birth, life, death, judgment, and then eternity is not how reality actually unfolds, but a simplified story, one designed to keep you fixated on a future that never arrives? You've been led to believe that your life is a prelude, a waiting room, a rehearsal for something greater that happens after you die. But what if the truth is far more immediate? What if the judgment isn't later, it's now? What if this isn't the preparation for the test, but the test itself? And what if no one is grading you but you? This isn't a timeline, this is a terrain, a symbolic interface that responds to your every thought, action, and frequency in real time. You are not waiting for a cosmic courtroom. You are already in it, not as a defendant, but as the creator of your own path. Your life isn't moving toward a final judgment, it is the judgment. Each moment, each breath, each decision you make is an energetic imprint that ripples into the field and reflects back as experience. This is not about punishment or reward, it's about recognition, alignment, evolution. The myth of linearity is comforting. It tells you that the hard part ends at death, that once you cross some invisible threshold, you'll finally meet your maker, and everything will be sorted out, your questions answered, your efforts tallied, your fate decided. But what if that moment is not ahead of you, but around you, happening constantly? What if this realm, this strange and often contradictory experience you call life, is not an audition for heaven or hell, but the actual terrain where those frequencies are explored, chosen, and inhabited? You are not here to be judged. You are here to become aware. And awareness is the test. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. About whether you respond to life unconsciously, from fear and habit, or consciously, from truth and love. That's it. The test isn't being administered by some external deity holding a checklist. The test is administered by your vibration. Every time you make a choice, the field around you adjusts. Not because you're being punished or rewarded, but because this reality is vibrationally sensitive. It is reactive, not static, symbolic, not fixed, and your awareness is what determines how the symbols arrange themselves. Think about it. Haven't you noticed how your life changes, not just with action, but with intention? How things align when you're clear, and fall apart when you're scattered? How people enter or exit based on the energy you're holding? This is not magic, it's feedback. And the reason this realm feels so charged, so intense, so emotionally magnified, is because you're not just passing through it, you're learning within it, you're inside the architecture of your own transformation. The test is not about how much you achieve, it's not about how good you appear to others, it's about what you do when no one is watching. It's about whether you can choose forgiveness when it would be easier to choose resentment, whether you can speak your truth when silence would be safer, whether you can stay open in the face of betrayal, grounded in the face of fear, and connected in the face of separation. These are not moral tests, they are vibrational markers. And each time you pass one, your frequency shifts. And when your frequency shifts, your position within the afterlife field shifts with it. You don't need to wait for death to find out what kind of soul you are. You can see it now, in the patterns you attract, the challenges you face, the synchronicities that unfold, the energies you magnetize. The test reveals itself through experience. It's in the repetition of your lessons. It's in the people who trigger your wounds. It's in the cycles that won't break until you change, not your surroundings, but yourself. You've been told life is a timeline, but timelines are fragile here. They blur, they bend. Time doesn't move the way you think it does. Sometimes a year passes and nothing changes. Other times, a single decision reshapes everything in a matter of hours. Because time in this space is symbolic. It stretches and compresses based on your alignment. The more conscious you become, the faster things shift. The more stuck you feel, the heavier time becomes. This is not random, it's part of the design. The test is woven into every layer of this simulation. You don't need to wait for some dramatic revelation to prove that you're being tested. Just look at your own life. Look at the parts that repeat. The lessons you can't seem to outrun. The patterns in relationships. The fears that wear different masks but speak in the same voice. These aren't curses, they're checkpoints. They're asking you one question, again and again: are you awake yet? Because when you are, when you begin to see through the illusion, the game changes. The test doesn't end, it deepens. But it no longer feels like suffering, it becomes sacred. You start to understand that the people who challenge you most are your greatest teachers, that the pain that breaks you open is also the pain that frees you. That every trial is a coded invitation to remember who you are, not a body, not a personality, but a being of light, navigating density with the goal of becoming lucid inside the dream. And lucidity is the highest grade. Not knowledge, not dogma, not obedience, but awareness. Can you hold your truth when the world tries to program you? Can you stay rooted in love when everything around you seems designed to provoke fear? Can you look into the face of darkness and see your own reflection, unafraid? These are the questions of the soul, not asked once at death, but constantly in the flow of life. And what happens when you start to pass the test, not through performance, but through presence? The simulation responds. The veil begins to lift. Patterns that once ruled you lose their power. People who no longer resonate fall away without drama. Guidance becomes more clear. Synchronicities increase. Dreams become messages. Reality becomes symbolic rather than chaotic. You realize you were never being judged, you were being given the tools to remember. And this is the real awakening, when you stop seeing life as a timeline and start seeing it as a mirror, a multi-dimensional feedback loop that never punishes, only reflects, that never condemns, only calls you higher. The test is love. Not romantic love, not surface-level affection, but the deeper love, the kind that transcends judgment, includes shadow, and radiates truth, the kind that sees everything as connected, the kind that dissolves illusion by its very presence. So no, you're not waiting for judgment, you're in it, right now, and that's not something to fear, it's something to honor. Because it means your life matters, every thought, every emotion, every choice. Not because someone else is watching, but because you are, your soul is watching. And it remembers what you're here for. It remembers the blueprint you chose. It remembers the frequency you came to embody. And it's doing everything it can to guide you back. Not forward, back to the awareness you had before the forgetting, before the veil, before the illusion of time. And in that awareness, you realize the test was never about passing or failing. It was about waking up. What if I told you that the body you see in the mirror is not you? That the name you answer to, the face you recognize in old photos, the voice you hear when you speak, none of it is who you truly are? What if all of that is just your avatar, a temporary interface, a vessel designed for this particular realm, one that allows your consciousness to interact with the afterlife simulation you're already living in? Because, if you've ever felt the strange disconnection between what you feel inside and what the world sees outside, you've already touched the truth. You are not the character. You are the one playing it. You are not the image. You are the observer behind it. The body is like a suit, a brilliantly engineered biological costume equipped with sensors we call senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. It lets you navigate this dense, coded environment. But it's not who you are, it's who you're using. Just like a player uses a joystick to move through a game world, your consciousness uses the nervous system and brain to move through this physical plane. It's immersive. It feels real. But underneath it all, there's a presence watching. A presence that doesn't age, that doesn't speak in language, that doesn't panic when the body is threatened, because it knows the body is temporary. Have you ever looked at your hands and thought, this doesn't feel like me? Or heard your voice in a recording and barely recognized it? Or caught your reflection in a window and felt that weird, surreal sensation of distance, like you're watching someone else? These moments, brief as they are, crack open the illusion. They are reminders. You're not fully in the body, you're looking through it, you're using it like a tool, a lens, an avatar customized to your soul's frequency and mission. And yet, the world trains you from birth to identify completely with that avatar. You are given a name, a nationality, a gender, a story. You're taught that your worth depends on how that avatar looks, how it performs, how it's perceived. Slowly, your sense of self gets entangled with the vehicle. You start to believe the mask is the face, that the pain in the body is your pain, that the failure of the identity is your failure, that the body's death will be your end. But none of that is true, and deep down, you know it. Ask yourself, who were you before the name? Before your parents gave you a role to play? Who were you before anyone told you what to believe, how to dress, what to feel? Who were you before the world pressed its narrative onto your skin and told you it was yours to carry? That's the real you, the one beneath the layers, the one that's always been watching, always been aware, the one that noticed when your body changed through the years, but never changed itself, the one that has been quietly observing the entire journey, not from the eyes, but from behind them. This is why mystics and spiritual initiates across cultures speak of waking up from the dream of form, because the body isn't the dreamer, the mind isn't either, they're part of the dream. The dreamer is the consciousness animating it all, the one that steps in and out of avatars like clothes, the one that exists before birth and continues after death, the one that cannot be touched by disease, aging, trauma, or even time. That is who you are. And the purpose of this avatar, this temporary form, isn't to define you, it's to teach you. Each body comes with its own lessons, limits, and lenses. Your current body, with its unique DNA, heritage, desires, and pain, is like a filter. It colors your experience in a very specific way, and through that coloring, your soul learns. It explores aspects of reality it couldn't access any other way, not for punishment, not for ego, but for expansion, for remembrance. But the challenge is forgetting that this form is not the full story, getting lost in the role, identifying so deeply with the character that you forget you're the player. You start to fear death because you think it's game over, not game transition. You start to compare your avatar to others, not realizing that each one is designed for a completely different mission. You start to chase external validation, not knowing that the real source of joy isn't what the avatar does, it's how awake the player is while doing it. When you begin to shift your identity from the form to the formless observer behind it, everything changes. Your fears begin to dissolve, because nothing in this world can truly touch the real you. Your self-worth stops depending on the temporary, because you know your value is intrinsic. You start to see others not as bodies, but as fellow players, each wearing their own avatar, each at their own stage of awakening, each carrying wounds that aren't personal, but archetypal. Compassion grows. Judgment fades. Life becomes less about winning, and more about remembering. This is not an idea to believe, it's a truth to feel. Sit in silence, close your eyes, ask yourself, who is watching these thoughts? Who hears the inner voice when it speaks? Who notices the breath, the heartbeat, the emotion? That watcher, silent, still, eternal, is the true you. And the more time you spend in that awareness, the thinner the illusion becomes. You begin to detach from the avatar, not in a way that makes you careless or numb, but in a way that makes you free. And when you live from that awareness, the afterlife simulation responds. The code begins to shift. Life no longer feels like a chaotic maze. It becomes a lucid dream. The symbols become clearer. The lessons become gentler. You begin to navigate not from fear of what might happen to your avatar, but from the clarity of what you came here to remember through it. You realize that this body, this life, this moment, is sacred only because it is temporary, and through that sacredness, you awaken. So if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own skin, like the world doesn't quite make sense, like you're playing a role that was never truly yours, that's not confusion. That's awakening. That's your soul nudging you to look deeper, to question the script, to step back and remember that the player is not the game. The dreamer is not the dream. The essence is not the avatar. You are the witness, the presence, the field of consciousness behind it all. And now that you know that, what will you do with it? What if everything you think is real is actually the illusion? What if the world you touch, taste, and see is the dream? And what lies beyond the moment of death is the waking life you've long forgotten? It sounds backwards, doesn't it? And yet, over and over again, people who've had near-death experiences, who've crossed that invisible boundary between life and death, come back with the same message: this world is not the real one. What they saw on the other side wasn't a fantasy. It was more real, more vibrant, more alive than anything they had ever known. And when they returned to their physical body, they didn't say, "I woke up." They said, "I fell back asleep." That inversion changes everything. Think about that. People who clinically die, heart stopped, brain flatlined, medically gone, return describing a realm so expansive, so deeply familiar, that their previous life feels like a distant echo. They talk about colors that don't exist in our spectrum, light that has intelligence, communication that happens instantly, without words. They describe a sense of oneness, of absolute love, of home. And when they try to explain it, they often say the same thing: "I can't describe it, because the words don't exist here." They don't mean they forgot what happened. They mean what they experienced was beyond the structure of this dimension. It's like trying to describe a 4D world using only 2D language. There's a deep, inner knowing, but it doesn't fit inside the mind's framework. Why? Because the mind was built for this dimension. The consciousness, however, remembers the one beyond. One of the most powerful patterns among near-death experiences is this recurring sense of awakening. People don't just float above their bodies and feel peace. They realize something. They remember that they are not their bodies, not their stories, not their trauma. They remember that this life is not all there is. In fact, they remember that this life is more like a dream their soul entered into, a learning simulation, a temporary realm, an experience. And once that becomes clear, everything changes. They no longer fear death, not because they've become reckless, but because they know what waits on the other side is not punishment, it's truth. They describe a love so profound it dissolves every scar, every regret, every illusion of separation. And here's the key: they don't describe it as something they entered, but something they returned to. It wasn't new. It was ancient. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was home. Over and over again, these experiences point to the same paradox. The place we call the real world is the dream, and the place we've been told to fear is the reality. This doesn't mean this world is meaningless. On the contrary, it's meaningful because it's temporary, but it does mean that we've been seeing the structure all wrong. One woman who had a near-death experience after a car crash said that when she left her body, she instantly understood why her entire life had unfolded the way it did. Every painful moment, every decision, every heartbreak, none of it was random. It was part of a soul blueprint she had helped create before entering this life. She saw her life not as a straight line, but as a living mandala, intricately woven with lessons, symbols, and opportunities for growth. And when she came back, she no longer blamed life for being unfair. She saw it as brilliantly orchestrated for the expansion of her consciousness. Another man who died during surgery described being pulled into a field of light so pure it had a frequency that sang. He said it didn't look like anything, but he could see it. It didn't sound like anything, but he could hear it. It was as if all his senses had been upgraded, sharpened, and fused together. And in that space, he realized that what we call reality on Earth is like watching a film through frosted glass. Everything here is dulled, filtered, symbolic. But over there, it was immediate. There was no waiting, no deception, just truth. And it wasn't scary. It was beautiful. Some people meet what they describe as guides or beings of light. Not angels with wings, not religious figures with crowns, but presences, consciousnesses that radiate pure love and intelligence. These beings don't lecture or scold. They gently show you what you've forgotten. They hold up a mirror, not to judge, but to reflect. And many near-death experiencers report something called a life review, where they not only see their life from beginning to end, but feel the emotional impact of every action they've ever taken from the point of view of others. Not as punishment, but as awakening. Because once you feel what others have felt through your choices, you begin to understand the interconnectedness of everything. You begin to remember that what you do to others, you do to yourself, because there is no other. This life review doesn't come with fire or brimstone. It comes with compassion, with clarity, and with an overwhelming sense of, now I see, Now I understand. When these people return to their physical bodies, many of them are changed forever. They lose interest in superficial goals. They become more present. They begin to seek purpose rather than performance. They understand that life is not about winning or surviving or climbing a ladder. It's about awakening within the dream. It's about remembering while you're still here. Because the real treasure is not what comes after death. The real treasure is when you begin to carry that higher awareness into this realm. This is the inversion no one talks about. That the afterlife isn't just what happens when you die, it's the source code of what you're living in right now. You're already inside it. But you're inside a lower frequency version of it, like a training ground, a dense layer designed to teach through contrast. That's why it feels so heavy sometimes, so confusing. You're not broken. You're in a slowed-down, symbolic echo of your original consciousness, a classroom, a field for remembrance, and NDEs are like cracks in the simulation. Moments when the soul temporarily steps outside of the dream and remembers the larger truth. Not everyone needs one to awaken, but those who have them often come back to remind the rest of us that we've forgotten. The dream is beautiful, painful, strange, symbolic, but it's not all there is, and when you begin to truly grasp that, the fear starts to fall away. You stop needing everything to make perfect sense. You stop demanding permanence from temporary things. You begin to live with a kind of sacred detachment, not numbness, but clarity. You feel more, not less. But you cling less. You grasp less. You let life move through you rather than trying to control every piece of it. You came here for a reason, to learn, to feel, to awaken. And NDEs are reminders that this realm is not random, it's radiant with meaning, even if you can't see it yet. They are proof that you are more than a body, more than a name, more than a timeline. You are a soul playing in a realm of symbols, and the moment you begin to suspect the dream, you start to wake up from it. What if you're not here to escape this world, but to wake up within it? What if enlightenment isn't about ascending to some distant paradise or detaching from the human experience, but about becoming lucid right here, right now? Inside this intricate simulation that you once mistook for reality, imagine, for a moment, that life is not a journey toward heaven but a dream you've entered, on purpose, to remember who you really are. A dream so convincing that you forgot it was a dream. A dream designed not to trap you, but to test your awareness, to invite you to become conscious inside the illusion. That's what spiritual awakening truly is. It's not a reward after death. It's not the end of suffering. It's not even a destination. It's the shift in perception that happens when you realize, wait, this is not all there is. It's the exact moment when the veil starts to thin, and everything that once felt concrete begins to feel symbolic, coded, intentional. It's like lucid dreaming, when you're in the middle of a dream and suddenly recognize that it's not real in the way you thought. But instead of waking up and leaving, you stay in the dream, fully aware, and begin to move through it consciously. That is the purpose of your existence here. That is the real, afterlife awakening. Lucid dreamers often describe a specific sensation when they realize they're dreaming. A jolt, a vibrational shift, a rush of energy that floods the dreamscape with clarity. The colors become more vivid. The environment responds to their thoughts. The dream stops feeling random and starts feeling alive. That's exactly what happens in the afterlife simulation when your soul begins to stir from its slumber. When you begin to suspect that this life, this name, this body, this timeline, is not the totality of your existence, but a layer, a projection, a carefully designed mirror. The dream is not the enemy, the forgetfulness is. And awakening is not about destroying the illusion, it's about seeing through it. Understanding that every person, every pain, every synchronicity, is part of a greater curriculum designed to bring you home to yourself. You didn't come here to escape the dream, you came to master it. You came to become lucid inside the afterlife, not to reject the experience, but to navigate it with awareness. Because when you begin to wake up, the game changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me about myself? You stop reacting and start responding. You stop chasing illusions and start noticing patterns. The people around you become characters in your awakening, mirrors for your healing, messengers for your evolution. You begin to see that the universe isn't random, it's intelligent. Every detail has meaning, every symbol has purpose, and you are not powerless within it. You are a co-creator, shaping your reality not by force, but by frequency. Lucid dreaming inside this realm means you no longer live on autopilot. You feel more, you notice more, you become sensitive to energy, to alignment, to when something resonates or repels. You start making choices not from fear, but from truth. You begin to notice when you're being pulled into a storyline that no longer serves you, and instead of getting swept away, you pause. You choose differently. That's the shift. That's the power of awakening within the dream. And just like in lucid dreams, when you become aware of the illusion, it doesn't make everything easier. It makes everything clearer. You're still in the terrain. You're still navigating contrast. But now, you're doing it with eyes wide open. You see the traps, consumerism, ego, identity, fear, not as reality, but as tests, as thresholds, as invitations to remember. And the more lucid you become, the more these traps lose their grip. Not because they disappear, but because you do. The false self begins to dissolve, and the deeper self, the observer, the presence, the soul, begins to take the lead. This is not a metaphor. You are literally in a dreamlike field, a symbolic space where reality responds to your consciousness. Science has already started to echo this truth through quantum physics. The observer influences the outcome. Reality is not fixed. Everything is interconnected. Ancient wisdom has always said the same thing: as within, so without. The world is a mirror, the kingdom is within you, and now, your own inner experience is confirming it. Every time you shift your vibration and watch your life shift with it, you are being shown that you are already within the afterlife. You are already within the dream. And the goal is not to run from it, the goal is to wake up inside it, because once you do, you begin to access deeper layers. The symbols become richer, the guidance becomes more precise. Life becomes a conversation with the divine, not a monologue of suffering. You realize that heaven and hell were never places to go, but states of consciousness you tune into. That karma is not punishment, but feedback. That healing is not fixing something broken, but remembering you were never broken to begin with. All of this becomes clear when you become lucid, but here's the twist. Lucidity is not an accident, it's a choice. You choose to question the narrative, you choose to pause before reacting, you choose to see the deeper lesson behind the surface chaos. And every time you do, you reclaim your awareness. You become more conscious, more awake, more alive, not in the physical sense, but in the soul sense. You begin to remember. You remember that you are the dreamer, not just the dream, that this life is not happening to you, but through you, that your challenges are not punishments, but teachers, that your intuition is not imagination, it's guidance. And the more you live from this remembering, the more the dream begins to shift. It becomes softer, more responsive, more harmonious, not because life becomes perfect, but because you become present. Lucid living is the most powerful form of awakening, because it allows you to bring the light of your soul into the density of the simulation. You're not escaping, you're integrating. You're not abandoning your life, you're transforming it, from the inside out. And every time you fall back asleep, every time you get lost in drama, fear, distraction, it's not failure. It's just a nudge to wake up again, to become lucid again, to take a breath and remember, this is not what it seems. So what do you do with this realization? You live differently. You speak from truth, not habit. You love without attachment. You forgive without conditions. You move through this realm with the grace of someone who knows it's temporary and therefore sacred. You become a light for others, not by preaching, but by embodying. And little by little, dreamers around you begin to stir. They feel your energy. They notice the clarity in your eyes. They begin to question their own sleep, and so the awakening spreads. Not in some explosive event, but in quiet moments, in choices, in presence, in love. That is how the dream begins to dissolve, not into oblivion, but into revelation. Until one day, the line between this world and the next no longer feels like a wall, but a window. And through that window, you see yourself, not as you were taught to be, but as you've always been, awake, aware, eternal? What if everything you've just realized was more than information? What if it was a mirror being held up to your soul, a quiet voice that's been whispering to you since you arrived here, growing louder, clearer, bolder, because now you know, this isn't what you were taught it was, this isn't the beginning. It's a continuation, a terrain shaped not by chance, but by consciousness. And the most powerful question you can now ask yourself is the one you've spent your whole life avoiding. Now that you know this isn't real life, how will you live? You've been handed a key, not to escape the dream, but to see it for what it is. This world, what you've called life, is not the original stage, it's the echo, the afterglow. The symbolic realm your soul entered after the body you thought was you dissolved. You are already in the afterlife. The question is no longer, what happens when I die? But what do I do now that I know I already did? That question changes everything. It means that survival can no longer be your goal. It was never supposed to be. You're not here to claw your way through time, accumulate false achievements, and chase comforts that evaporate the moment you grasp them. You're here for something much deeper. You're here to remember, to become lucid in a realm designed to pull you into forgetfulness, to awaken inside the afterlife before it dissolves and reshapes again. The moment you stop treating this world as ultimate reality is the moment you start treating it with reverence. Not as a playground, not as a punishment, but as a precise and mysterious mirror designed for your soul's transformation. Everything here, every person, every challenge, every breakthrough, is coded to show you who you are not, so that you can finally remember who you are. That is the entire point. So the real question is, will you keep acting like this is the beginning, or will you finally treat it like the sacred continuation that it is? You've seen the signs already, the memories that don't make sense, the strange echoes of places you've never been, the dreams that feel more vivid than waking life, the inner knowing you can't explain. These are not glitches, they are reminders. Hints left by your own higher self, breadcrumbs to lead you back to the truth you buried on your way in. And now you stand at a choice point, the kind of choice that doesn't come with flashing lights or dramatic music. It comes in silence, in the quiet moment after realization. Will you stay asleep in the dream, walking through the motions as if nothing has changed? Or will you begin your conscious exit, not out of the world, but out of the illusion that this is all there is? A conscious exit is not about dying, it's about living differently, walking with awareness, speaking with intention, acting from alignment rather than reaction. It's not about transcending the body, it's about embodying the soul. It's not about rejecting the dream, it's about becoming fully present within it, lucid, aware, empowered. When you do that, everything changes. You stop fighting the terrain, you start interpreting it. You become the decoder of your own symbolic afterlife. The people who trigger you are no longer enemies, they are reflections. The challenges that repeat are no longer curses, they are lessons still in motion. The emptiness you've felt is no longer a flaw, it's a doorway back to the infinite. But here's what most never realize. Once you awaken to this truth, you cannot unknow it. You can ignore it, you can suppress it, you can drown it in distraction, but you can't erase it. And the longer you delay, the heavier the dream becomes. Because the dream was never meant to carry you while you sleep. It was meant to respond to your awareness. And now that your awareness has been activated, you'll start to see the shifts. People falling away, new paths emerging, synchronicities accelerating. The symbols around you becoming more personal, more charged. This is not random, it's the simulation reconfiguring in response to your inner change. You've crossed an invisible threshold, and whether you realize it or not, your exit has already begun, not from the world, but from the story you were told to believe. The story of limitation, of separation, of survival. That story ends the moment you stop playing by its rules. You're not here to survive the afterlife. You're here to awaken within it, to see the test for what it is, and pass it, not by performance, but by remembrance. To look into the mirror of this world and say, I remember who I was before all of this began. Because you do remember. Not in the mind, in the soul, in the spaces between thoughts, in the feeling that you were never just a name or a history or a form. You were something infinite wearing something temporary, and now the veil has cracked just enough for you to feel it. So ask yourself, right now, what does a soul do when it remembers? Does it keep pretending, or does it begin to move differently, to speak truth even when it shakes the ground, to love without conditions, to forgive not because it's easy, but because it's liberating, to walk through the illusion, not as a victim of fate, but as a conscious architect of vibration? You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to see the full path. You only need to take the next step, consciously, with presence, with truth, with the knowing that you are no longer lost in the dream, but awake inside it, because now you know, and the knowing itself is the first step of exit.